Just as the government was going into a shutdown, the Secretary of Hair Gel and his enabler-in-chief gathered all of America's military brass together for what my guest co-host today called a culture war TED Talk. So while a lot of pods are available to you today to talk government shutdown, we're going to do something different. Ravi is out this week, so I asked my friend Paul Rieckhoff to join us. You've heard Paul on the show before. Paul is a former high school football coach, a 9/11 first responder, an Iraq war veteran, the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, as well as the founder of Independent Veterans of America. He's a regular on MSNBC and CNN as a respected commentator on national security, veterans issues, and politics generally. So today you get Paul and myself, an Iraq vet and an Afghan vet, breaking down yesterday's culture war TED Talk one clip at a time. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54. Paul, let's start right here. Why do we think Trump and Hegseth did this? What is their motivation for this meeting that could have been an email?
You know, I was hoping we'd start with baseball, right?
Yeah, this YouTube audience, man, they're like, you want a banner? You banner at the end. You give us the stuff first.
No, but you know, you got the Chiefs helmet behind you. I got my Yankees gear on. We're in the playoffs.
I'm offended by that, as you know.
I think, no, don't be offended by that. I mean, it's, I'm also, as we talked in the warm-up here, I'm wearing Missouri's own
Yogi Berra. That
Yogi
makes
Berra,
it acceptable.
Great World War II veteran and one of the greatest Yankees of all time. And maybe a good pivot point, because Yogi Berra was an icon, but he was also a role model. He was a great leader, not just for the Yankees and not just on the ball field, but for America. And I think what you saw yesterday with Hegseth and Trump was a low point, not just in the civil-military divide, not just in our politics, not just in our national security, but in American leadership and in the ability to be role models for our kids, for our young boys and girls. Why did they do it? Very simple, for the clicks. They wanted a tremendous content opportunity. They wanted a giant photo op, and they got it. For them, it was mission accomplished. It was the latest in a series of flexes where they could show the country, their base, and the world how powerful they are. And I think the biggest story in America and the world, I've been saying this on every interview for the last few months, really, is that Donald Trump can do whatever he wants with the most powerful military the world has ever seen. And yesterday was just the latest example. It's included bombing Iran. It's including sending the National Guard into Portland. And it's including an unprecedented meeting where you make 800 generals come to one room on a couple of days' notice in the middle of a shutdown to get what I think was a culture war TED Talk from Pete Hegseth. And then a really demented, partisan, aggressive, violent talk from a commander-in-chief that's telegraphing his punches. And that's really the subtext here. Beneath all the other pageantry and the peacocking, which is what that really was for Hegseth, a guy that I've known for a long time. I don't know if you know him, Jason.
I don't know him, but I know you do, yeah.
But the really important point was Trump said, we're going to sick you on American cities. And that's what's coming. And Portland is next. And he, named political enemies. And that is such uncharted territory. And it's so dangerous. And it's so real that I think in the midst of the shutdown and the Epstein stuff and whatever else is happening with Bobby Kennedy, and especially for Democrats that I think often feel like they're getting hit from all sides, you got to keep your eye on the most important thing, and it's national security. And it's the fact that if Donald Trump wants to do the next most extreme thing with the most powerful military on the planet, it can be sending National Guard troops into your city, or it can be using a nuke. Because right now, nothing is stopping him from doing anything he wants.
That's right. And they are clearly he wants to signpost, he wants to indicate that he's going to do those things to loosen all of us up for that. Particularly, sending troops into American cities, all that sort of thing. And he doesn't want the story right now to play that way. So let's go, Jeremy. We're going to go to this first clip, which is the way Hegseth introduced this whole thing. And this, to me, this is the story that they wanted out of this, is this framing right here.
And as history teaches us, the only people who actually deserve peace are those who are willing to wage war to defend it. That's why pacifism is so naive and dangerous. It ignores human nature and it ignores human history. Either you protect your people and your sovereignty, or you will be subservient to something or someone. It's a truth as old as time. And since waging war is so costly in blood and treasure, we owe our republic a military that will win any war we choose or any war that is thrust upon us. Should our enemies choose foolishly to challenge us, they will be crushed by the violence, precision, and ferocity of the War Department. In other words, to our enemies, F-A-F-O. If necessary, our troops can translate that for you.
Paul, to your recollection, has the United States ever had a president or a secretary of defense or war or a general who is a pacifist?
I don't think so.
Bit of a straw man argument there, don't you think?
It is. And interestingly, I'm dropping a new episode of my podcast tomorrow with the great Ken Burns, the historian. And we talk a lot about whether there's any precedent for what is happening. And in particular, if there's any precedent for Congress getting steamrolled and abdicating their responsibility like they are right now. And he says, no, you can listen for that or watch it tomorrow. But I think my takeaway from that is we just came from like a university lecture at like Sheepdog Knuckle Dragger University, right? You know what this is about, right? This is about like, grrr, like we're going to beat your ass. We're tougher than you are. My dad can beat up your dad. Like it's a really backward approach, not just to politics, but to national security, right? It ignores diplomacy. It ignores the opportunity for infrastructure investment and all the other things that you and I did in Iraq and Afghanistan that are a part of a complete approach to waging war and declaring or maintaining any degree of peace. Because frankly, what I think most of us who've been to war know is that, you know, waging war is easy. Creating peace is hard. Yep. And it's easy to fire off missiles. What you do afterward is actually the hard part. And it requires intelligence and it requires cooperation and teamwork and all the things that you teach on the baseball teams you coach and have been taught in this country for generations. So this was like the worst elements of the manosphere manifest themselves in front of the most patronizing talk I think our generals have ever seen. Who the fuck does he think he's talking to? I think we need to say, right? Who the fuck does he think he's talking to? Right? These are guys who were majors and lieutenant colonels who bled and fought and died and had friends die. They carried their friends home. And this guy, and I'm not going to do like who's a bigger pogue.
Yeah, we don't need to gatekeep, but he doesn't have the experience. Neither do you or I have the experience.
I mean, that's the difference here. And that's there's another moment for us, right? Yeah. Every once in a while, we have to go, this guy is really Secretary of Defense, the guy we know, the guy we've been watching. Holy shit. Trump has run the table to the point where 4 years ago, they would have been super happy if Hegseth was VA Secretary. Yeah. But in this upside down world, they have thrown the Hail Mary and they landed it. And it was Hegseth. And he has become the lead element in the culture war. And the lead spot for that thrust is the Department of Defense. So here's the big deal. He's not just talking about what they want the Department of Defense to look like. He's talking about what he wants America to look like.
Yes.
He wrote a book about it, right? And he tried to hawk the book in front of the generals yesterday, right?
Yep. Real quick, let's go ahead and play that clip, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Some of it hidden. Or as the chairman has put it, we are clearing out the debris, removing the distractions, clearing the way for leaders to be leaders. You might say we're ending the war on warriors. I heard someone wrote a book about that.
What a douchebag. Anyway, I didn't mean to screw up your role there.
Can I really tell you that I talked a little bit about this on CNN last night. I think this is really important. They've kind of twisted it all up, right? Like if we weren't tougher, if we were just tougher, if we weren't hamstrung, if we had no rules of engagement, we would have won in Afghanistan. And we would have won in Iraq. And we would have won in Vietnam, if not for all those pesky generals and politicians. And it's an inversion of history where they're simultaneously attacking the military and pretending to defend it. And I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent. And I think this is a time for Republicans, independents, and Democrats to call it what it is. This is an inversion and a manipulation of history. And it's a manipulation of the love of our troops into a place where it's become class warfare. I tried to explain it to another guest on the show last night. It's like union versus management. It's like populism on steroids. And it's very, very shrewd. And in many circles, it's very effective, but it's very manipulative and it's very dangerous, especially to our troops that are caught in the middle of it.
And to your point, part of that manipulation is telling military audiences, this one and every other one that Trump gets in front of over and over again, that their enemies are the left. The theory that they have here, which may not be as far off as we hope, is that if you constantly, as commander in chief, tell your subordinate commanders and the enlisted troops over and over again, the enemy is over there, and I'm telling you who it is, at some point, they're going to believe you, especially if you keep deploying them opposite those people when they are protesting. And they keep seeing those folks then, meeting the troops in the street as protesters. You can potentially manufacture that situation.
It's the same playbook over and over again. It's they, them, the other is threatening you and your existence and your future and your core values. That's the playbook. But they are shrewdly and smartly and strategically starting the execution of that playbook at the Pentagon. Because if you take the Pentagon, you have the biggest budget in the federal government, you have the guns, you have the symbolism, you have the power, you have all of it, right? If you were going to take apart the government for parts, right? What's the single most valuable part? It's the Pentagon. It's the Department of Defense. And that's where they started. Hegseth was the first nomination. He was the first one to go through. And he is on plan on just about everything. Imagine how far ahead they would be, Jason, if they didn't have such a fuck up like Hegseth as SecDef. Yeah. Imagine if it was someone who's just shrewdly below the radar and really effective, right? They'd be in Kansas City and Miami by now.
Yeah. Or like if they had like a former general who happened to also be a Kool-Aid drinker, right? Like who was, because Hegseth is clearly like the wholesale communication broadcast side of it. He's very good at it. I mean, as we saw there, he did it on Fox forever. Yeah, he's very good at it. He looks the part. He does all those things. But at the end of the day, and again, I'm not trying to gatekeep anybody's service, but at the end of the day, he's a dude who, my recollection is, didn't make it to 03 because he couldn't conform to the environment, right? I mean, like he's not
really
built
importantly
for it.
Too. I think this is really you can't breeze past this. The optics of what they continue to do is angry white Christian men, right? And I think it's very important for us as white men ourselves to call this out and to challenge them on this, because they are talking about narrowing the military. They are talking about they want people who are all in. They want people who are drinking their Kool-Aid. They want people who agree with their politics. And if you're fat or you're a woman or you wear a dress or any of these other things, you're the other. And what that's effectively doing is consolidating the recruiting pool of what they've got. They've always wanted it to be Trump's military. Well, if they keep this shit up, women don't want to join the military. People of color don't want to be in the military. They've disproportionately purged women and people of color from leadership, and that narrows the pool. So you got, Theo Vaughn watchers and UFC fighters and ICE wannabes that are all going to join the military. And over time, it will become more monolithic. It will become more male. It will become more white. And you've got a guy on stage who has, arguably Christian nationalist tattoos under that suit and was himself barred from being deployed on January 6th with his unit because they didn't trust his allegiances. So it is a really spectacularly important moment. And I think the shutdown has already kind of absorbed it, but you can't go past the fact that while everyone's looking at the shutdown, right, he's going into Portland. And he's talking about Chicago next, and he's talking about New York next. And by the time we get to the end of the year, I think we'll have at least 6 more cities and probably 1 more foreign country that they hit.
That's so right on. Let's go ahead and to illustrate that point, let's play the woke Department of Defense clip here and react to it.
For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons. Based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We've pretended that combat arms and non-combat arms are the same thing. We've weeded out so-called toxic leaders under the guise of double-blind psychology assessments, promoting risk-averse, go-along-to-get-along conformists instead. You name it, the department did it. Foolish and reckless political leaders set the wrong compass heading, and we lost our way. We became the woke department. But not anymore.
So, to your point, this is not just about the military. This is about their version of what America is, because what he's saying is the military defends America, but he's saying it only defends this part of America that looks and acts this way. And then, as they do every time they have an opportunity to speak out loud, they're insinuating that any person who was elevated to any rank in the military or anywhere else in the government, who was black, who was a woman, who was a person of color of any kind, who was gay, who was any of these things other than people who look like Secretary Hairgel, that they could not have deserved the position, and that we got to get back to it going to people who deserve the position. And so I thought it would probably be helpful for a moment. Well, let me back out of this for a second and say this show is about helping people who oppose this administration talk to their friends and family, as you know, in a way that is persuasive. And I think that the knee-jerk reaction of a lot of people watching or listening to us right now is to pan this approach and to make fun of it, right? But the truth is that this is, as you pointed out, a potentially politically effective approach. But what we really need to do is we need to explain why diversity in the military and in its leadership ranks is not charity, why it is not a social program, and why it actually does make our national defense stronger. So I'm teeing you up to do that.
Yeah. I mean, look, let me just break it down to its basics. Our military is supposed to be reflective of our society, period. Right? And unless you want it to just be made up of Hegseth and his Fox News friends, it must be diverse, because it should be representative of every kind of American from every background, and everyone should have an opportunity to serve. And I'll flip and say everyone should have an obligation to serve. So if they were so high on this, let's all get in. Why not do mandatory service? Why not reinstate the draft, right? And maybe that's in the cookbook somewhere. But in the meantime, what they're doing is creating the most massive civil-military divide in modern history, because this isn't the way it is anywhere else. You can't, crush diversity at a local school. You can't oppose diversity at a Fortune 500 company. You can't say we're only going to have certain types of people at a public university. So it's out of alignment, not just with American values, but with American reality. And that's why it's become kind of like a laboratory or a test case for not just their view of America, but their worldview. And let's put a point on something else. So it's also saying that C.Q. Brown, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, an African-American pilot who's a badass, amazing story, he was one of the first people they fired, right? And who do they shit on? They shit on the former Secretary of Defense, who was also black, right? And the idea that C.Q. Brown didn't earn his rank, that he didn't earn his stature, and the way they dismiss people and they talk down to them and they berate them is very, very important, because they also talked yesterday about a culture of beating the shit out of people, about letting drill sergeants rough you up. And if you can't take it, well, you should join some other thing. And it's really a drag backward away from modern military evolution, where the most effective person on the battlefield might be a skinny drone operator who's 40 miles away from the battlefield. That's what's happening in Ukraine right now. And it's very disconnected, not just from our culture, but from the evolving military reality that anyone in Israel or Gaza or Ukraine or anyone else can tell you about.
He literally stood in front of the commander of and the senior enlisted leader of the Space Force yesterday and explained that if your troops aren't doing hard PT 5 days a week, then they shouldn't be in the Space Force.
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't matter if they can read. It doesn't matter if they can read, right? It doesn't matter if they can talk to another human being. It doesn't matter if they can operate a complex piece of machinery or break down a weapon system or communicate in a foreign language, right? Which is as necessary on the battlefield as kicking doors in. My most valuable weapon I had on the battlefield in Iraq was my translator. 100%. Right? I use my translator. You've been such a great advocate for our allies and translators. That's why so many of us are giving so much to these people, because they were so helpful to us, right? We were interwoven. I'm not, spilling any blood right now for my M4, which I didn't use that often, right? Mm-hmm. But Mohammed Omamayez, who lives in Nashville, saved my ass.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Man. Well, and, on top of that, like, to your point, is that they are trying to create a military that just looks like them. But what they don't realize, to the point of making us less safe, is that if you are effective in doing that, you have a smaller, by far, military. There aren't actually, I mean, America is becoming more diverse all the time. And if you are going to say, like, it's got to be white, Trump-loving dudes who, are going to make, who can lift this or do that, and that's their only skill set, like, there's a lot of positions we won't be able to fill. And there's frankly just a lot of numbers we won't be able to get to. But that's, and from Trump, it's not excusable, but it's expected, because Trump's understanding of the military, despite the fact that he's now been president for 5 years, is 80s action movies. I mean, that's in 70s action.
But he does understand. There's always been a very important understanding that everyone should respect. He understands the political power of all of it.
Yes.
And that's what this is. It's a great casting, whether it's, Tulsi Gabbard or Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth was basically designed in a conservative lab. You know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when Concerned Veterans of America happened and the Koch brothers were funding it and he was on Fox News, he came up in the farm team, right? And he was built for a moment like this to be a multi-sport, multi-content, multimedia kind of athlete. And that's what he is. And I'll tell you, on the left and from the Democrats, there aren't too many that can counter that. And I've said this a lot, when the shutdown happens, Democrats, when I come on this show, are going to get pissed at me, but you got Chuck Schumer going out into the ring and into the argument with Dana White. And Dana White's going to kick his ass. Dana White's on 60 Minutes. And it's not just a battle for the politics, it's a battle for the culture. And I think you've been ahead on this. And I think our friend Wes Moore is maybe the best example of who I think Democrats need to put in the ring more often, because
Ruben Gallego, I'd say too.
You want to do a TED Talk? Let Wes Moore go do a TED Talk.
Yeah.
You want to do push-ups? Do push-ups with Wes Moore. You want to get in the ring? Let's see Wes and Hegseth get in the ring, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, 100%.
And Wes is also, I think, embodying, and again, I'm not a Democrat. He is embodying the type of leader, the type of father that we want in our society. Someone who's compassionate, someone who's strong, but not bang on your chest strong. The kind of strong where you're strong, you don't have to tell people how strong you are.
That's right.
That's the kind of leaders we need more of.
Well, and they want a completely different set of leaders in the military. Let's go to this clip about the way that they want to change the complaint process, the IG and ME process in the military, because this is one of the ones that, as somebody like yourself who cares a lot about the institution that is the United States military, this is one that made me think, oh crap, they could do a lot of damage in the next 3 years with this.
Some of it, for the most part, we don't need new standards. We just need to reestablish a culture where enforcing standards is possible. And that's why today, at my direction, I'm issuing new policies that will overhaul the IG, EO, and MEO processes. I call it the no more walking on eggshells policy. We are liberating commanders and NCOs. We are liberating you. We are overhauling an inspector general process, the IG, that has been weaponized, putting complainers, ideologues, and poor performers in the driver's seat. We're doing the same with the equal opportunity and military equal opportunity policies, the EO and MEO at our department. No more frivolous complaints, no more anonymous complaints, no more repeat complainants, no more smearing reputations, no more endless waiting, no more legal limbo, no more sidetracking careers, no more walking on eggshells.
So when I listen to this, what I hear is we're going to make the problem of active duty and veteran suicide a lot worse, because we are going to go back to a place where toxic environments are encouraged. And I don't know about you, like, did you ever find yourself in a situation where you served either under or adjacent to a really toxic and crappy leader? Yeah.
Yes.
And anybody listen to this, most people have had a bad boss in their civilian life and knows how terrible that is. And I can promise you, listener, that pales in comparison to the experience of having a bad boss in the United States military. It really will cost people's lives,
because you have to live with them.
Right.
Like, imagine if you had to go home with your boss every night and sleep in the same room with your boss and everybody else, because Many of us have had that experience where you have a bad boss that literally is in your home and at breakfast and everywhere you go, right? So I think there's an important takeaway. This is maybe like the doomsday scenario for Me Too, right? Like this is the opposite of the Me Too movement, because what it's saying is there will be no, this is a basic, like you can't make an anonymous report if you were sexually harassed.
Right.
This is just puts a chilling and catastrophically dangerous atmosphere over everything. If you commit a crime, if you witness a crime, it's like, it's going to be like a snitch culture. It's just, it so erodes, most importantly, respect and trust and honor, which is so sacred to all. This is like, hey, we're going to let all you dogs loose. Go for it. It sounds to a lot of people, especially those farther away from the military, like we're creating a rape and pillage military. And we're going to send them into Portland. And everybody's going to talk to everybody at boot camp like Donald Trump talks to everybody. And that's what's really important too, Jason, was Trump came on afterward and gave one of his most deranged, disgusting talks in a long time after the UN speech, where he spoke condescendingly and rudely and dismissively and dishonorably to the leaders of the entire world, right? So I think I said this on Charlie Sykes' show last week. You know, what happened at the Ryder Cup and the, like, if you don't know, this terrible, rude crowds that were throwing shit at Rory McIlroy's wife, that is the manifestation of this. Trump is creating a command climate where you don't have to worry about what you say, where you can do whatever you want, where you don't have to respect somebody. And even if you don't, they can't complain about it. Go ahead, go whine about it, you whiner, right? It's this demented inversion that reminds me of what I heard Vietnam vets talk about when they first came home. And they said, you know, somebody told me about walking into Sonny Montgomery's office, who was a World War II veteran, right? I think might have been a Medal of Honor recipient. And a few Vietnam veterans were there for the first meeting. And he said, what do you crybabies want? What do you losers want? They were the first generation that lost a war. So the World War II vets didn't want to give them a memorial because they're not going to give a memorial to a bunch of losers, right? And I was on CNN last night, and there was a veteran alongside of me who said, you know, for the last 20 years, we haven't been fighting to win. I said, I was fighting to win. You were fighting.
That shit pisses me off so much.
Right? But he said, oh, but not you. I don't mean you. I mean those generals. I was like, which general? The one that was a major when you were in Afghanistan? That guy wasn't fighting to win. Who specifically wasn't fighting to win? Because it's about these boogeymen, and especially around the military, they can do it because so few people have served. And now you have these adjacent cosplay circles of people who want to join ICE or want to join customs and spent the last 20 years playing Call of Duty in mom's basement when you and I and our friends were deploying around the world. So this is like the greatest opportunity for people who never really had to serve in the last 20 years. But now you can join ICE and kick around a bunch of immigrants. That is such a dangerous manifestation and unleashing of the worst parts of our culture.
It is, these guys watch A Few Good Men and they say Jack Nicholson's character is the good guy, right? And so anyway, I know you have a heart out here. You have to go. You had a Chiefs thing you want to talk about before you go and before I take a break and
all right.
come back.
I'm going to tell you this, okay? So last weekend we go to the Giants-Chiefs game. You know that I'm a Giants fan. My little boy, River, is 6 years old. I swear to God, he might be one of the biggest Chiefs fans in the world. Okay? We go to the game. He's wearing a Chiefs jersey in front of the entire Giants stadium. He doesn't give a shit. He's got a band on. He's got the whole deal. Giants get their ass kicked. At the end of the game, everybody wants to leave, and we decide to stick around. We go down to the field. Long story short, when everybody else clears out, a couple of players have gone by. My kid's gutted. He's upset. He didn't get to see anybody. Kelsey gives him a wave. Patrick Mahomes comes off the field, looks directly at him, runs across the field, and handed my son his armband.
Oh, that's so cool.
That he wore during the game. Has the date on it, has his blood on it, okay? and I just want to celebrate it because it was a moment where a very visible male leader did something kind, went out of his way for a little kid. And at one point I was like, is Mahomes' wife next to me? Why is he coming right toward us? But he locked into my little guy with his 2 front teeth missing, who was like, Patrick Mahomes. And the crew, what was really great about it was everybody around him celebrated that moment for the kid.
That's so cool.
And I think we got to get back to that, where we're looking out for each other's kids and we're lifting. Like another guy tried to pick my kid up, and I'm like, hold on, I got it. Community celebration around an act of kindness, right? That's what I want to leave you with, because I may not agree with Patrick Mahomes' politics. You may not. I don't know enough about his politics.
Well, thankfully, we don't really know.
No, we don't really know. But I know one thing, that he went out of his way to be kind to my little boy. And that was the greatest moment of his life. And now, before every game, when he has a rough day at school, I'm like, okay, rub the armband for a little Mahomes magic. Because we all need a little more magic and kindness nowadays.
To me, maybe the best part of that story is that clearly Mahomes has a practice of dating something like that prior to the game so that he can make that happen for somebody. That is super cool that he put the date on there.
Yeah, I just want to end with this. I mean, we don't talk enough about how being strong is about being kind and about being generous, especially fathers who have to stand up and be a contrast to the anti-role models that are Trump and Hegseth. And they're out there everywhere. They're Little League coaches and their moms too. So many teachers, so many folks like you and your wife that are great role models, Jason. I just want to thank you for the positive example you set and how you talk about your family and how you talk about your responsibility as community leaders, because you are the antidote to what we saw in Quantico this week.
Well, you too, man. I'm really glad you came on to talk about that. I know you got to go. Thank you. We're going to go to a break. We're going to come back and talk about what Trump said at that thing. But again, thank you, Paul. You always are.
Thank you, buddy. Go Yanks.
Not so much, but you're great.
Thanks, pal.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this football season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Not going to lie. Been cleaning up on Prize Picks a bit this year. This week, I'm looking at the board, selecting Mahomes, to make a kid's day and also pass for a couple touchdowns. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Play Prize Picks to get action on football in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. It's the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on Josh Allen's pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup, only on Prize Picks. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose Flex Play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the Power Play. No matter your play, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just someone whose picks you like, you hit the follow button and you check out every lineup they create in the new Feed tab on Prize Picks. Prize Picks puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast and secure. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code MAJORITY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code MAJORITY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right.
When we relaunched this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setups, filming schedules, logos. It was super overwhelming. And every day it seemed like we had a new decision that needed a new answer. And when you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. The Midas Touch Network is proud to have their own store using the Shopify platform. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style, accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Now get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. You can easily create email and social media campaigns whenever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing, returns, and beyond. Turn your business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/majority. Go to shopify.com/majority, shopify.com/majority.
In a few minutes, we're going to be joined by a candidate for the United States Senate. But before we do that, I'm going to take you through a few of the clips from what Trump had to say to this gathering of military brass. Let's start with his rather ominous opening.
Fantastic job. I've never walked into a room so silent before. This is very... Don't laugh. You're not allowed to do that. You know what? Just have a good time. And if you want to applaud, you applaud. And if you want to do anything you want, you can do anything you want. And if you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank. There goes your future. But you just feel nice and loose, okay? Because we're all on the same team. And I was told that, sir, you won't hear a murmur in the room. I said, we got to loosen these guys up a little bit. So you just have a good time. But I want to thank...
All right, there's two things happening here. One, despite the fact that he's been president for 5 years, Trump still doesn't really understand military courtesy and drill and ceremony. He doesn't understand that when he walks into the room, these guys are all going to come to attention, and they're not going to sit, they're not going to relax, and guys and gals are not going to sit, not going to relax until he, as the commanding officer in the room, gives them some indication, which would come along the lines of take your seats or stand at ease, that kind of thing, right? He doesn't do that. So as a veteran, I watch this and I go, what a jerk. Like, he did the first couple minutes at least of his speech with these dudes standing at the position of attention. And you'll notice he never said, take your seats, relax. He never gave him anything like that. So what happens is that some of the commanding officers, you know, because they're all commanding officers in that room, some of them in the front start to slowly sit down, which gives everybody the indication that I think we've been given at ease. He doesn't do that because I guess it hasn't gotten across to him. He's just not the kind of human being who pays attention to that sort of social cue or cares about it. But more importantly, what he's doing here is he's right off the bat letting them know, you saw that I fired a lot of your colleagues, a lot of people that you came up through the ranks with. Just so you know, all the stuff that was said today and all the stuff that I'm about to say, if you have any issue with it, you best keep it to yourself or you're going to lose your job too. That's really scary, and that's the kind of thing that Paul was talking about a few minutes ago. Now, let's go to him revealing the locations of nuclear submarines.
Mention of nuclear, and it was really a stupid person that works for him mentioned the word nuclear. I moved a submarine or two, I won't say about the two, over to the coast of Russia, just to be careful, because we can't let people throw around that word. I call it the N-word. There are two N-words, and you can't use either of them. You can't use either of them. And frankly, if it does get to use, we have more than anybody else. We have better, we have newer, but it's something we don't ever want to even have to think about. But when somebody mentions it, that submarine started immediately thereafter.
So you ever have that boss who has terrible insecurity and so constantly has to remind you that they're your boss or give you some sort of flex? This is Donald Trump having to let everybody in the room know, like, you know, I can move submarines around. Like, they already know that, right? If you're already president, having to constantly flex about this sort of thing is ridiculous. And so, you know, all he's doing, he's making sure if intelligence hadn't figured out where the, you know, so-called silent service is, they're going to find out from the president just telling you where he sent submarines, you know, which he's literally coming on stage to follow the introduction that came from his Secretary of Defense, who put classified war plans out on an unsecured app over text message. So it's not really that surprising. But then let's go back to the theme of Trump not really understanding the military except through what he saw on television in his formative years. Let's listen to Trump talking about battleships.
to use an old term. I think we should maybe start thinking about battleships, by the way. You know, we have a Secretary of the Navy. He came to me because I look at the Iowa out in California, and I look at different ships and the old pictures. I used to watch Victory at Sea. I love Victory at Sea. Look at these admirals. It's got to be your all-time favorite, in black and white. And I look at those ships. They came with the destroyers alongside of them, and man, nothing was going to stop. They were 20 deep, and they were in a straight line, and there was nothing going to stop them. And we actually talk about, you know, those ships. Some people would say, no, that's old technology. I don't know. I don't think it's old technology when you look at those guns. But it's something we're actually considering, the concept of battleship. Nice 6-inch sides, solid steel, not aluminum that melts if it looks at a missile coming at it. Starts melting as the missile's about 2 miles away. No, those ships, they don't make them that way anymore. But you look at it, and your secretary likes it, and I'm sort of open to it. And bullets are a lot less expensive than missiles. A lot of reasons. I should take a vote, but I'm afraid to take that vote because I may get voted out on that one. But I tell you, it's something we're seriously considering. There were powers. There were big powers. They were just about as mean and scary as you could be. And so we're looking at that.
Sometimes nostalgia is cute, and sometimes nostalgia is stupid. And when you are making the argument that we have to get back to a place where the military is just about brute force and it's exclusively about violence, don't get me wrong. If you need violence, you need lethality, as they say. The United States military is the most capable force of doing that and has been for many years of anything in human history. But you also, in order to wield that sword, you need intelligence. You need tactics, you need strategy. And he's standing there. He knows that, like, what we don't need are big metal ships that he knows that the people looking back at him, that show Victory at Sea was not their favorite show because they're a generation younger than him. So when you talk to people about what was said at this event, this gathering that Trump and Hegseth had, it's important to remind them that these dudes have an outdated idea of what the military is. And that doesn't mean because it doesn't include quote unquote political correctness. It's because they're imagining that we are going up against the Japanese Navy of the 40s. And that's not what's happening, right? That is just not what's happening. Now, let's finish this little segment by talking about the fact that they are laying the groundwork, as Paul and I talked about, for the idea that we are under invasion. We know that he said that. Let's talk about the part. Let's play this clip where he talks about planning to invade blue cities.
What they've done to San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within. Controlling the physical territory of our border is essential to national security. We can't let these people in.
There are things that Hegseth and probably even Trump said during this that I promise you, there are people in uniform that were sitting in their audience that liked some of those things. We shouldn't pretend that they didn't like any of it, right? We shouldn't pretend that, for instance, when Hegseth talked about, grooming standards or talked about, basic training going back to being pretty difficult. There's a part of me, a former officer candidate school platoon trainer, who says, yeah, like there's a part of me who thinks that's important, right? And there's a part of me who consciously thinks, yes, we've handed out too many shaving profiles. Yes, we need to enforce the standards. Absolutely. But what they're hoping to do is take that part of you and take that part of their audience there and expand that out into going along with everything else. And what I can promise you is when he talks about the idea that there's a war happening within the United States and that they're going to be a big part of going into American cities, that is not something that the vast majority of that audience is willing to go along with. Because now, what they'll end up doing when given the order, I don't know. But what they're thinking while they're sitting there, I have a great degree of confidence that these are men and women who have done multiple tours of duty, lost friends, some of them been wounded overseas, fighting against America's actual enemies. They're not sitting there saying, I joined the military and rose to this rank and watched my friends get hurt and die, and in some cases die afterwards because of the mental wounds that happened during our service. I did all that so that I could stand across from peaceful protesters and act like they're the enemy in American cities. He went on to say, I'm running out of time. I'm not going to play the clip, that without any self-awareness, he said to this audience that what was going on in Washington, D.C. before he deployed the National Guard was worse than any place in the world, including Afghanistan. A vast majority of the people in that audience have been to Afghanistan, and I guarantee you that they were internally rolling their eyes as hard as possible at that idea. So, just take some sort of solace in the idea that, at least for now, they're not buying a lot of this stuff. So before we bring in our guest, and Jeremy will let me know when she's ready, I want to talk a little bit about this Riyadh Comedy Festival thing. If you don't know about this, there are a bunch of American comics who have taken a very large payday and like the biggest comics in the United States, and agreed to go to Saudi Arabia to perform. And I want to talk about this for a reason that you might not have heard anybody else talk about it from this perspective. But first, let's talk about Mark Maron, who's I've been on his show. I'm a big Mark Maron guy. It's probably my favorite podcast. Getting to do WTF was like a highlight for me. And I agree with Mark Maron's take on this. Let's listen to Mark Maron's take on the Riyadh Comedy Festival.
There's a Riyadh Comedy Festival. I don't know if you heard about that. This is true. There's a Riyadh, Saudi Arabia Comedy Festival. I mean, how do you even promote that? Like from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it. I mean, the same guy that's going to pay them is the same guy that paid that guy to bonesaw Jamal Khashoggi and put him in a fucking suitcase. But don't let that stop the yucks. It's going to be a good time. Full disclosure, I was not asked to perform at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, so it's kind of easy for me to take the high road on this one. Easy to maintain your integrity when no one's offering to buy it out,
The reason I wanted to talk about this is actually because I want to talk about the left's reaction to this, because I think it demonstrates an evolution of understanding of modern American politics. There are some of the biggest names who are going there. Comics that I love, Bill Burr, Tom Segura, more controversial people who I got to say, I also do really like, people like Dave Chappelle, folks like that, in terms of I do consume their comedy. Don't agree with everything from them, but they're brilliant. There's no doubt about it, right? And what a lot of people have said about this is that it demonstrates a lot of hypocrisy, because a lot of these folks are the people who have said there's a cancel culture out there. We don't have free speech. You should be able to say whatever you want. And then they go out and, they take a big payday to go to Saudi Arabia, which is about the most oppressive human, rights violating regime there is. Definitely have no free speech, and they're going to take the big payday. Yes, that is accurate. But what I want to point to is, if you look at the way people have reacted to this, it's been very different. I have not seen anybody call for a boycott of these comics that a lot of people really like. I have seen a lot of people say that they're really disappointed in these folks. And I got to say, I feel like politically this is the right way to proceed. Because, David Cross, another guy I really like, said that he's really disappointed because these people are his heroes. What David Cross didn't do is say, I will never again watch anything Dave Chappelle does. I will never again speak to Bill Burr. Didn't say any of that, because I think what we are coming to understand on the American political left is that we can be disappointed in people who might be on our side sometimes, and we don't have to dismiss them entirely. So it's okay to be really angry that somebody like Aziz Ansari is going to perform at this thing, because I think I saw him on the bill. If I'm wrong, I apologize to him. But, we can be very disappointed in that. But it doesn't mean we have to say that that person is dead to us forever, because we don't actually want to isolate these people from everything, because there is a fight going on in this country that is not left versus right. It's team democracy versus team authoritarian. And when people make mistakes, and I think performing at this is a big mistake, we don't just write them off forever. Because if you do that, you can expect them to just go to the other side entirely and look for an audience there. And that doesn't help us at all. So with that, I want to go to our guest. Our guest is Hie Shoffner. She is a 6th-generation family farmer. She's running against Tom Cotton for the U.S. Senate in Arkansas. So let's bring her in. Hie, thanks for joining us.
Hi. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. Okay. First, we're gonna get to some topics of the day. But first, tell us about your campaign. Like, you are, you and I have talked on the phone, and in preparing for this, I went to your website and I was like, okay, I want to make sure I get her intro right. And you're pretty serious about putting out there, like, I'm not trying to, you probably have a lot of other credentials, but you're like, I'm not trying to impress you with a bunch of other credentials. I'm telling you, I'm a 6th-generation family farmer who's never run for office, and that's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate. And I think people are starting to recognize, like, we may need a lot more of that kind of thing. So tell us more about yourself and about why you decided to run.
Yeah. Well, I'll do a quick introduction. So I'm a 6th-generation farmer. I am from the northeast part of Arkansas, right where, the Arkansas Delta starts before it meets the Mississippi River. And I grew up farming in a little town that's actually named after me. It's called Shoffner, Arkansas. And it's where my family has been living and farming for 150 years.
Wow.
And so as the 6th generation, I also grew up farming alongside both my parents. And we grew the commodities, the soybeans, the corn, the rice, the wheat, and the cotton. And typical farm kid, I rode horses. I was in rodeo, did barrel racing. I had a herd of pet goats. I was in 4-H. And what I like to tell people is that, growing up on a farm, working with my parents, I learned a very important lesson that made them successful, which is that, you earn your place in this world through sweat and service to your community. And I really took that to heart. And 9 years ago, I actually came back to the farm when my dad was diagnosed with dementia, and I took over the soybeans and the rice and the corn that we grew. And I also became an advocate, for small family farms like mine, the financial viability of small farms, for environmental conservation. I worked on regenerative farming practices. So I really feel like I did what I was supposed to do, what I was taught to do. I worked really hard. And I served my community and I played by the rules. And then this year we had to make the heartbreaking decision to close. We did that in February, and we were one of hundreds of farmers in Arkansas, thousands across the country. And it was this first wave in what has deepened into a true farm crisis, one that could take out as many as 1 in every 3, 1 in every 2 farmers in Arkansas. And in experiencing that, I really felt like you don't have to be a farmer in Arkansas to know what it feels like to work hard and do everything right and still fall behind. And it is not because we have failed. It is because the system is rigged against regular people, against working Arkansans and families. And it's been rigged by politicians like Tom Cotton. And I decided that, if I can't farm, if I can't do the thing that I was supposed to do, that I felt like I was supposed to do, I'm going to run for office. I'm going to fight for small businesses, for farms, for families like mine, and restore some common sense. Go up to DC and give people a dose of reality.
Republicans have worked very hard and been very effective at claiming the banner of rural America and the vote of farmers and sort of the brand of farmers in the same way that they've done with, American Pie and the American flag and all that kind of thing. But what I think, even frankly, a lot of Democrats don't know is the difference between, from a governmental perspective, the incentive system for corporate farming versus family farms, and what those policies that the Republicans have are actually doing to family farms. And I don't think they realize the degree to which because farmers, they just assume, are all Republicans. They don't realize the degree to which that the way Republicans, when they're in government, approach agriculture, the agricultural sector, how similar it is to the way that they approach the energy sector, the way that they approach retail and everything else. Like, so could you talk a little bit about that, about like what the difference is for family farmers when it comes to, progressive versus conservative policies?
I think it's really all about just this, and this isn't just in agriculture. It's this incentivizing just the few people who are at the top, right? And instead of everybody else, the 1% versus the 99%, 85% of all farms in the United States are family-owned farms, like mine. But we're not the ones that in the end come out on top. And that's because we as a nation have continued to write farm bills with farm incentives that basically say, we're going to go ahead and let companies consolidate. We're going to give farmers fewer choices. And then they said, you know what, we're only going to incentivize the production of certain crops, these commodities, soybeans, corn, rice, wheat, cotton, grain, sorghum, at the expense of what I think is not even a radical idea, but the possibility that we could grow actual food. And we've been doing that for decades. What drives me nuts about this is that we have been here before. In 1980, my dad went broke in 1980 and had to leave Shoffner, Arkansas, to go be a farm manager somewhere else. And he was able to come back in the late 80s and sort of claw his way back into a new operation. And you would think that we would learn, right? Prior to 1980, the government was telling us farm as many acres as you can, produce as many commodities as you can, regardless of the quality of the crop, regardless of the, oversupplying the market. And then they turned around and did it again. And here we are 45 years later in the exact same position. I would argue even worse. It's all vision is what it is. I mean, I think that we have politicians who think that we can fence time, or that we can go backwards, or that we can just continue doing what we're doing. And that is the definition of insanity, right? Like, let's do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's not going to work anymore. It really just, it isn't. Again, it's going up to DC and giving people a dose of reality.
I was interested in having you on because I think this perspective is really important for progressives to hear, because they don't realize that that voters in rural areas or in more rural states, actually, if you can get this message across, actually are really receptive to it. My experience with this was, I never had the Farm Bureau's endorsement for anything, right? And you're kind of nodding your head and smiling because and I know what a lot of listeners don't know, including a lot of Republicans out there who are probably not listening, but what they don't know, which is that the Farm Bureau is not actually a group of people that represent farm interests. They're an insurance company.
Right.
And so, but it's a great brand, and they always endorse Republicans because insurance companies tend to do that. And so what I would do is I would go to, even after I, had been endorsed against, I would call local farm bureaus across the state and I would ask if I could come and speak. I would show up. The people who showed up didn't know that I had or had not been endorsed. And I would stand up and just talk about all of my policies with regard to agriculture. And people would be like, well, it actually makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, I'm sure somebody after I left got up and was like, just, Farm Bureau endorsed the other guy, but until that moment, they were always very receptive to it because the people who showed up at those meetings were mostly family farmers.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm running into that as well. A lot of people are like, well, we have an incumbent policy. My point is it a friendly incumbent?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm not going into these spaces and asking anybody to become a Democrat. I'm not. What I'm asking is, you've got this guy in DC who has done absolutely nothing for you. He went to DC 15 years ago and pulled the ladder up behind him. And he will whine about anything else other than the economy, anything other than healthcare, anything other than education. Or would you like to have an actual rice and soybean farmer in the Senate? Would you like to have a working Arkansan who understands the struggle? It's this government inaction that we're experiencing right now, and especially today, this sort of top of mind government inaction. It's hurting people who are already struggling. It's hurting people who work and pay taxes and raise their kids and do everything right. Everything costs too much right now, and we're not tackling that problem. Nobody can afford to buy groceries or go to the doctor or go to the pharmacy. Why aren't we talking about those issues? And I can't help but think it's because the people in DC don't struggle the way we do. They don't know what it means when the government can't function. And I think people are crying out desperately for someone who believes that the purpose of government is to create opportunities and to make progress instead of just posturing around for the next election.
So before we go, educate our listeners and viewers, if you would, about what's going on right now with regard to the United States and Argentina and China and soy farming, because this is an issue that is way below the radar. I guarantee you that about 0.5% of people listening to this show right now know anything about this, but you know a lot about it, and it's a really emblematic example.
Well, and I will start off by saying I think a lot of people don't really understand the impact of what it means to have a farm crisis. Now, if I'm coming at this from someone in Arkansas. Agriculture is our largest industry. It is literally the largest contributor to our economy. Farmers, we're only 1% of the labor force, but you underestimate the anger of farmers at your own risk, because we have people we employ, they have wives, their children go to public schools, we have accountants, we have attorneys, we have bankers. A lot of the rural banks depend on us. I mean, it informs the politics in our state capital of Little Rock. When a farm closes, it isn't this trickle down effect that kind of affects the economy. We are talking about flushing a toilet of economic devastation if we lose 30 to 50% of all farms. So I'll preface it with everyone should care about what's happening. Now with Argentina, here's basically the story. Back in 2018, we started a trade war with China. And we lost about 15% of the market share, and the government bailed out farmers. They gave us a big payment to make up for the losses we incurred that year because China stopped buying 15% of our beans. And then we sort of went back to normal. Like everything kind of went back to normal, except it didn't, because China, through their Belt and Road Initiative, went down to Brazil and built an entire soybean infrastructure that we must have known about, but did absolutely nothing about. And so when we entered the second trade war with China this year, they were able to give us the middle finger and say, you know what? We don't need y'all anymore. We were the primary market for soybeans for China. We are now not even a tertiary market, because after they got all their beans from Brazil, they went to Argentina next. What farmers woke up to is news that the government of the United States was going to send a $20 billion bailout to Argentina. And while they were talking about it, Argentina dropped their export fees and just sent 35 shiploads of soybeans to China.
So we paid.
We are bailing out another country's farmers. We're paying another country.
Well, they switch custom. Well, they switch to who?
Right.
While China switches who it buys from.
And they know perfectly well what they're doing. China knows exactly what they're doing. They are giving us the middle finger and saying, we do not need you anymore. And we saw the text message in the media. We saw Secretary Rollins talking to Secretary Besant, I think. Is that who she was texting?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Saying, well, China has leverage over us.
And what I want people to understand is that this administration that acts like we're going to make things here again, right? That's our whole thing. We're going to make, they're not doing anything to actually make that happen. They're making things worse, but that's what they're selling. In the meantime, they are doing things to take the thing that we know we can make here because we grow it here and making it harder to actually make a market for it anywhere else. And people may be listening to this and thinking, well, would we really have ever had a long-term chance to have China as a customer? Yes. In 2011, I went when I went with the governor of Missouri. I was in the state legislature running for Secretary of State at the time, and I went as part of a delegation with the governor to sell commodities to China on behalf of Missouri. We went with the heads of rice, which is a whole lot of people right down in your neck of the woods, right down in the Boot Heel, the part of Missouri that's in Arkansas. People won't get that joke unless they look at a map.
Right.
But and with soybeans and everything, corn, we took all of it. And we sold billions of dollars worth of commodities from Missouri to China. And here's the thing that people listening don't know, and why this is such a huge market that we're losing, is that this is what I learned during that trip. Is the reason we were able to sell rice to China is that the average size of a farm in China is a 1/4 acre. And when you have billions of people to feed and your farms are on average a quarter acre large, you got to buy it from somewhere. And that's been the United States for a long time. And your point is Tom Cotton and the Trump administration have completely just let this walk right out the door.
Right. In the name of, restoring balance to global trade, which fine, you want to store, you make sure that America is getting the best deals. All right, we'll do that. But don't do that at the expense of a very large industry for many states. And in my opinion, Tom Cotton, any delegate from any of these rural states that depend on agriculture, they should be on the steps of the Capitol, making a lot of noise, standing up for their constituents, and not just farmers, but every single constituent in rural America, rural Arkansas, who depends on agriculture as an industry. And now at this point, I don't think we're talking about saving agriculture anymore in Arkansas. I think we're talking about rebuilding it. And we can do that. We can absolutely do that. We can take the 4 million acres of arable land, fertile land, and start growing food. This is a drum I beat all the time, which is that why aren't we growing higher value crops in Arkansas? Why aren't we putting small businesses in these rural areas that can process specialty crops? Why aren't we growing food that we can actually serve to Arkansas families and put on the trays of kids in Arkansas's school cafeterias? I mean, did you know that the largest restaurant in the United States is public school cafeterias?
That makes sense.
That is an opportunity that we as a state, as an agricultural state, are missing. And that is because our leaders have no vision. Tom Cotton has no vision. I would take that even further. He doesn't give a damn about us. Besides the fact that he has no vision, he doesn't give a damn.
Well, in order to get somebody from Arkansas who does give a damn there, can you tell folks before we go, because we're running out of time, can you tell them where they can find you and how they can help?
It's just HieShoffner.com. I am on every social channel you can think of at Hie Shoffner. Obviously, we're trying to get the message out there to as many people as possible, not just inside the state, but we've done extremely well gaining momentum. We just closed out the third quarter, having raised in 2.5 months over $620,000.
That's great.
Most of that's inside the state, average dollar donation of $50. Arkansans are ready for change. We want the rest of the country to look at Arkansas and see as much opportunity as we know that we have, and see something other than hate. So HieShoffner.com, all the social channels.
Awesome. Thank you, Hallie, for joining us. I really appreciate it. Good luck.
Ben. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay. That's the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks to Hallie. Thanks to Paul. Ravi will be back next week. And I think next week it's even me and Ravi, which it hasn't been in a couple of weeks. So you can find me, same place as always, at Jason Kander on everything. Please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Midas Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.